Good afternoon. Welcome to this informational session about the Doris Duke Clinical Scientist Development Award 2023 competition. If we can go to the next slide, Karen. Please remember to use this question button, but welcome. And these are just details that you have available if you have downloaded the request for proposal. So we'll get started with the next slide. Um, my name is Sindy Escobar Alvarez, and I am the director of a medical research program. And in this role, I am responsible for identifying current opportunities to improve human health through medical research and the wider assets of the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and in alignment with its vision for a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. Joining us today are also Kevin Sia, Program Officer, who is responsible for ensuring that our support is deployed with rigor, driven by excellence, and in line with our values for integrity, collaboration, open-mindedness, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Kevin manages the Clinical Scientist Development Award Program. So he's the person that will answer all the questions that you have about this award. And we have also Karen Han, our program associate, who is responsible for making sure that everything happens according to plan. So thank you, Karen. In this case, Karen spread the word about this event and made sure that the online application system is ready for you to submit your application. So among other things. So I will share about the foundation and how the Clinical Scientist Development Award fits within the vision of the foundation. Kevin will share about what is new for this year's competition and other information about the selection process for the award. And finally, Karen will go over important notes on how to apply. Now, the next slide, please. The Doris Duke Charitable Foundation is a group of organizations that comprises national programs in environmental conservation, performing arts, child well-being, medical research, and Muslim culture, as well as centers and museums supporting the well-being of people and the planet for a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. Next slide, please. So, in line with this vision, we aim to seed creative ideas to ultimately impact human health by supporting early career physician scientist research, time protection, and mentorship through the Clinical Scientist Development Award. And the goal of these awards, there are two goals here that if you click enter again, Karen, are to enable transition to independent research careers and to support foundational research contributions for transformative solutions to improve human health ultimately as a goal. And now the next slide. We believe that those transformational opportunities exist in the spectrum of research from understanding of mechanism of disease to health services and implementation research. And that opportunities exist in disease areas with high morbidity and mortality, whether related to a common or a rare disease, affecting the population, including those whose health suffers from marginalization in our society. And so we want to identify creative individuals with a vision to improve human health. And what does a creative individual with vision look like? Please visit our website. We do publish the awardees, the past awardees from this program. And if you click next, Karen, we believe that creativity lies in every demographic, and it is on you to apply, please, and on us to identify these creative ideas despite underrepresentation of important members of a population in the faculty ranks of clinical research. So in the past 2 years, 53% of our funded projects have been led by women grantees, and over 26% are led by grantees belonging to racial or ethnic groups that are underrepresented in the research workforce. So please apply, and I will turn it to Kevin.
Thank you so much, Cindy. So many of you may have already visited the landing page of the CSDA, which can be found at the web address at the top of the slide. We encourage you to visit this page, download the RFA, and use the linked FAQ to get quick answers to any questions that you may have. Next slide, please. The RFA contains all the eligibility criteria for this year's CSDA competition. We encourage everyone, including those who have applied in previous years and thus might have seen a different year's RFA, to please read this year's RFA carefully, as there are changes from year to year. Within the RFA and FAQ, we provide information regarding eligibility exemption requests, eligibility criteria considered for exemption, how to apply for an exemption request, what information will be provided, will need to be provided and a deadline for any requests. And all exemption requests are considered on a case by case basis after the submission deadline on October 14th. Next click, please. If you have specific questions about eligibility or eligibility exemption, please get in touch with us by emailing ddcf@aibs.org. Next slide, please. So we often receive questions regarding institutional affiliation, particularly from potential applicants who work at public universities. Applicants must have a full-time appointment at a U.S. academic institution that grants doctoral degrees and can receive awards as a 501c3 organization. Public universities have 501c3 grant receiving arms through which eligible applicants at public universities may apply. For instance, the University of Texas has the University of Texas Foundation. We encourage applicants at public universities to contact their grants office for more information. Next slide, please. The pre-proposal application is due on November 17th at 3 p.m., and compliant applications will undergo a first round of review. In January of 2023, approximately 50 applicants from this first stage will be invited to submit a full proposal, which will be due on March 14th, 2023. Full proposals will undergo review by a separate review panel. Recommended applicants will be notified in May 2023, with project start dates on July 1st, 2023. We strongly encourage applicants to follow the instructions in the RFA for submitting a full application. So to ensure a fair review, applications are checked for their adherence to the instructions before the review. Next slide, please. So I want to highlight a new and important aspect of the application this year. On page 14 of the RFA in the project information section, in addition to the other requested information, applicants will find 4 prompts new to this year's application that asks applicants to convey their research program's goals to improve human health. So from the perspective of the foundation, we want to understand the applicant's overarching research program, how applicants bring together their body of work and articulate how their research program seeks to improve human health, the population or populations that the research would ultimately benefit, and how the CSCA project that's being proposed moves applicants closer to these goals. Next click, please. A clear and concise response to these prompts will be evaluated by reviewers as part of the review criteria. So please, we urge you to pay attention to these and answer them clearly. Next slide, please. So strong mentorship is a critical aspect of a successful clinical research career. We all know that. It's also one of the multiple aspects of the application that will be evaluated. In contrast to previous years, we are asking for the designated mentor's letter of support at this stage of the competition. The letter of support from the designated mentor must be on institutional letterhead and must be 2 pages maximum. Attachment 3 of the RFA has all the details, including if applicants have a mentorship team and what information should be included in the letter. The letter of support is in addition to, next click, please. The letter of support is in addition to the mentorship form that the designated mentor will need to fill out and the institutional form that the department chair will need to fill out. Together, the mentorship form, the mentor letter of support, and the institutional commitment form make up the online confidential support material. Next click, please. Oh, sorry, go back one slide. Apologies. To be clear, we're asking for a letter of support from the designated mentor here. Applicants will have an opportunity to request their departmental chairs to write letters of institutional support if they are invited to submit a full proposal in January next year. Now, next slide, please. We strongly encourage applicants to look over all review criteria found in attachment 1 starting on page 20 of the RFA. While they may look similar, the CSCA review criteria are not the same as the NIH review criteria. Each application will be evaluated on these 5 elements here: investigator, mentoring and institutional environment, significance, originality, and study design. Reviewers will get the same criteria that you have in attachment 1 when reviewing the application. So we encourage applicants to review these criteria carefully as they work through their application. I'll now turn it over to my colleague Karen Han for how to apply and common errors to avoid.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes. So, as my colleague mentioned, I'll just be going over the process of applying now. So, you, as the applicant, need to submit your full pre proposal through our grants management portal called Giving Data. The link is here to the CSDA campaign, and it's also linked throughout the RFA. And you can also navigate to that through the CSDA webpage on our website. The second website that you will also need to visit is to complete all is to get access to invitations for the confidential support material. So this is the materials that your mentor and your department chair will need to submit. And that is through a different website, which is ddcf.smapply.io. A link is also available on the RFA here. And just to clarify, in terms of this secondary website, you as the applicant need to visit this website to send the recommendation request to your mentor and your chair. Your mentor and your chair then receive email invitations, which they accept, and they are then responsible for also going on this website to submit their respective forms due by November 17th. So there is the same deadline for both your pre proposal application and all confidential support materials. Um, as Kevin mentioned, new this year, the mentor at that time when they enter to submit their form will also need to provide a letter of support, which is uploaded through that same portal. Um, Applicants, you will not be able to see the recommendations. You'll just be able to go on and periodically check on whether your mentor and chair has completed their tasks. The minute that your mentor or chair completes their task and submits, it will actually auto complete on your end. So if both forms are in by the mentor and chair, that will automatically submit for you. You do not need to do any manual submissions. We would just advise periodically going on SM Apply just to make sure your mentors and chairs do complete before the deadline, because you'll be able to see whether that task is in progress or not. Um, so this is just a note for SM Apply, which is that second website I mentioned, which is what your mentor and chairs need to visit. When you visit ddcf.smapply.io, I just wanted to caution that there are multiple competitions that are available on this page. You will obviously want to click through to the one that is labeled CSDA mentorship and institutional commitment forms. And just a note that if you click on the link through your RFA, it will take you directly to the correct campaign. Just to help you out as you're completing all your forms, I would suggest that you refer to page 9 in the RFA because it provides a brief summary of all the application components and also has a quick table of contents that can direct you to what page in the RFA will go over which portion of the application you're looking for. So that's just to help you as you're working on this. And then briefly, just to go over some common errors we see, because as I mentioned, there is an administrative check prior to having your application go into stage 1 review. Um, as Kevin has mentioned, and I would like to reiterate, attachment 2 on page 22 of your RFA has a compliance checklist, and that is the same compliance checklist that we will use. So it's highly recommended that you do a quick pass over to make sure that you are compliant. And then also, just to reiterate, the designated mentor and chair need to submit their forms through the secondary web page, SurveyMonkey Apply. And if your mentor happens to be your department chair, they actually need to complete both forms. So you would enter their email twice and invite them twice because the chair form is different from the mentor form and they need to do both. Um, the designated mentor this year will be submitting a letter of support, and it can be no more than 2 pages maximum when they're submitting their mentorship form. Attachment 2 on page 24 of the RFA has additional details. In the event that you have a mentorship team, you are still limited to the 2-page maximum letter of support. And then just as a caution, do not recycle grant applications because there are specific formatting and section requirements that are unique to the CSDA. So just to make sure you're keeping compliant, you want to make sure it's specifically tailored to the CSDA. If you are a returning applicant, we would also caution you that there are changes in 2023 compared to 2022. So we always advise that you make sure you're referencing the current RFA, again, available through our website. And then also, you want to make sure that all the components of that pre-proposal application are in the correct order. We do specify what order you should be placing things in, and you can see that on page 15 of the RFA. And then as another component of the pre-proposal application, there is that research plan description. And if you go to page 18, you'll note that there are 5 specific subheading sections that we would like addressed. It's highly recommended that you simply directly copy and paste those subtitles into your plan description to make sure that you are addressing and hitting all those points, and also for ease of review. And then finally, for the bio sketch, for the applicants, we ask that you use the DDCF bio sketch template, which can be downloaded off your RFA. Applicants also need to submit bio sketches for their mentors and funding information, but that can be an NIH format. Only the applicant's bio sketch should be using the DDCF template. And then with that, I'll run through some of the key dates again. If you are requesting an eligibility exemption, you must do so by October 14th, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The link to requesting eligibility exemptions is available in your RFA. And then the pre-proposal applications will be due November 17th at 3 p.m. And that is also the deadline for the mentor and chair to complete their forms as well. They have the same deadline. And then if you are invited to submit a full proposal, you will be invited by January 17th, 2023, 5 p.m. And at that time, those full proposals will then be due March 14th at 3 p.m. And then should you be awarded, you will have notification of award by the end of May 2023. And the award start date for the 2023 CSDA is July 1st. And then with that, if you need to get in touch with us, we recommend emailing ddcf@aibs.org with the subject line 2023 CSDA and your last name. And then we also caution that it's better to email us as opposed to getting in touch with us through phone calls, because we can better guarantee a timely response and making sure that your questions are reaching the right person at the foundation. So email is generally your best bet here. And with that, we wanted to thank you for listening to the informational portion, and we will be opening it up for the Q&A session now. Please use the Q&A chat box, which I can see that some of you have already found. And at this time, we will note that if you have a specific question about the circumstances of your own eligibility, we would advise that you best hold off on this question and either submit directly through an exemption request or email ddcf@aibs.org, because we will need to review your bio sketch generally to be able to make a determination on your eligibility there, if it's very specific to your circumstance. And then also, we will try to get through as many questions as we can. We do have quite a bit of time for questions, but in the event that we are not able to address everybody's questions, we will be downloading the Q&A log, and we will email responses to our list of registrants after this session. So we will get to everyone's question. Thank you. And I'll open it back up to Cindy and Kevin to help me address these questions.
I see that there are open questions, answered questions. Karen, can you confirm that everybody can see those that have been answered, so I don't repeat those?
Yeah, I do believe once they've been clicked answered, the attendees can see it. So
Okay. I can get started, and Kevin, you and I can tag them on the Q&A. So I'll start with the first one, that is whether can we comment on whether applicants are expected to have an independent lab at the time of submission. So these competition, thanks for that question, is certainly for individuals who are at faculty level already at the assistant professor level. So I think in that regard, we expect that there will be post training and then the first faculty position.
So we have a question about the letter from the chair. So I want to clarify that in this in this stage of the competition, we are only asking for a letter from your designated mentor. The chair should fill out the institutional commitment form. Applicants who are invited to the full proposal to submit a full proposal next year will have the opportunity to ask their chair to provide a letter of support. But in this particular stage that you're in, the pre-proposal stage, what we're requesting are for your designated mentor to fill out a mentorship form and for the designated mentor to send a letter of support or to provide a letter of support, and for the department chair to fill out a form. All of this will occur on the same website and are submitted at the same website.
Well, I saw two, one that Karen answered about whether the system accommodates for more than one mentor. Certainly, you can indicate it on the form, but when there is that portion that Kevin has been referring to, there has to be a designated person to submit that on behalf of a team. And the evaluation of mentorship gets done primarily based on that designated mentor as well. In terms of, is there a preferred mentor type, whether it's a clinician scientist versus non-clinician, um, I think that applicants can make that determination better based on each project. We certainly provide some guidance that is part of the RFA and the request for proposals, and we recognize that there is a lot of information in there. So we hope that it's helpful. We try to describe what is the role that the mentors are expected to play, and it's quite possible that maybe you will need some technical expertise and some clinical expertise that not the same person will provide, and so that is. Uh, we hope that the information is helpful in making that determination. Kevin, you want to take the next one?
So there's a question about minimal effort that is required for the award. So there is, in order to uh, be eligible, we require that there must be at least 75% research effort protection guaranteed. So we do make exceptions for specialties that require um, maintaining clinical competency skills, such as those in surgery, and in those cases, applicants may be eligible to apply if a minimum effort commitment to research of 50% can be guaranteed during the award term. And reviewers will be able to evaluate whether an effort commitment of less than 75% would be conducive to a long-lasting clinical research career.
Thank you. And I see a question of, can the proposal be the same as a K-23 or others? And I think I'll address two questions here because I saw another one saying asking whether a ongoing K precluded application. So I'll start from that second part. If you have a K award, that does not preclude your eligibility on itself. Now, to this question of, can you have the same proposal? Well, we certainly understand, that the award is, or the research that you're proposing is expected to support different something that's not already funded, right? So there certainly cannot be overlap in terms of budget, but where I would caution of reading carefully what the review criteria are, because the reviewers will be looking for originality and how is this different. So if you do build on a project, I think I would caution to make it clear that it's not the same project, but how is what you're proposing either leading towards your broader vision of what you want to do, or how is it different? Because I think if it will look much like the same, they might list the question of why are you proposing this if it's the same thing.
I'll take the next one about applying for our 21 awards. Um, so we asked that applicants not have served as a principal investigator or one of multiple principal investigators of grants that are in the with direct annual direct funding in the amount of 225,000 or higher, with a start date prior to inclusive of July 1. Um, and we asked that applicants also not have applied for an R1 or equivalent as a principal investigator. So R21s, I think, are not R1 equivalent, so that would render you eligible.
Unless the cost is above
Unless
125.
exactly, unless the cost is above 225,000 annual direct funding.
Right. And somebody said they aren't able to see the questions. Says only the host. Thanks for that feedback. So we will try to recap and maybe we will distribute after all these more specific questions that are being responded to, just by typing. Thank you for letting us know. Related to that question that Kevin just answered, it says if you are running industrial sponsored clinical trials with minimal effort, are you still eligible for the CSDA? I think that we do count contracts or trials as uh, by the same rule that Kevin just described. So it depends on how large that is. If you're running a multi-million-dollar cost trial, I think we might consider that as well, according to the same rules of how large it is in relation to what the funding is for a research project grant, roughly. How many applicants do we typically have? Do you want to address that, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. So there are two questions here. One of them is how many applicants do we typically have? And in any given year, of course, it fluctuates, but anywhere from 180 to over 200 applicants. And can applicants invite others, like those in corporate and foundation relations system with the online application? I don't see why not. I think I'm hoping that I'm reading that question correctly. Uh, do you mean to say as letters of support?
No, I think, well, I don't know, Kevin, but I think the way I'm reading
Yeah.
is the there are some application systems where the applicant as well as other people can log in to build on that and to make sure that everything is complete and so on. Our application system, I believe, only the applicant has access to. So unless the applicants share their credentials, but I think maybe Karen might know about this answer more specifically.
Yeah, it would largely be advised that the applicant be the one who is directly working on it. You can, of course, yeah, share access and assistance from other people in your institution if that is the way you're choosing to work on your application. But we do largely recommend that it's one account at a time working on this.
Right. But if you have an account, you cannot invite someone else to join.
No, you as the applicant do not have that administrative power. So it would really, yes, be you sharing your login credentials. Um,
Thanks.
So there's a question here for surgeon scientist applicants, whether the chair should click yes or no to 75% research effort if they have 50% research effort protected. So for surgeon scientists, that would um, they should click no. That's the quick answer. The chair should click no, but explain that they have a room to explain that, of course, that you require maintaining clinical competency skills, and that's why there's 50% rather than 75% research effort. And of course, that will be evaluated as part of the review. And there's a question here of if they've been in a faculty position for less than a year, are they eligible to apply? So in such cases, we do have that eligibility window um, the nearer term one at December 1, 2021. So we don't make uh, or rarely make exemptions for those um, uh, faculty members that have held appointments for less than a year, uh, unless there are COVID related um, delays.
If there is an exceptional circumstance that we need to consider, we invite you to submit a request for an exemption. And there is a link on the RFA to a form to do that. Um, the form helps us evaluate the information, get the information that we need to make an evaluation and determination. But as Kevin mentioned, for if you have not been faculty for a year, we typically tend to not make those exemptions. Um, but we found that applications are more competitive if they have they're at least past the threshold. There's a question here about specific font sizes that we do include. Is there a preferred citation style for listing of publications? I would say no. Kevin.
That's right.
I see a question here about eligibility and saying, should I like to confirm whether I'm eligible or not, or whether I should wait until the next year. I mean, I think something that programmatically that's important to know, and that's actually a distinction from NIH, for example, is that whereas we have been able to offer these competitions almost annually, um, these are approved on our end on an annual basis by our board of trustees. So if there's any circumstance of a foundation that changed or it wasn't approved, I don't there is always that possibility that we cannot count on the next years, right? When we announce it is because we know that we are able to offer it. So just a word of caution there. Now to the more specific question, and I think it's just important to mention for us because it's just a way in which foundations work differently than the NIH, for example, and that impacts perhaps your own planning, but that is important now. And in terms of whether you were when you were promoted specifically, as Karen mentioned, I would invite you to submit that question to the email address. That email address, it is attended to. Responses are sent within 2 days, so we do respond to those inquiries.
So there's a question about holding uh, or being a part of an academic medical center that is affiliated with but not part of a university that grants medical degrees. And can physician investigators that hold the appropriate faculty position at the affiliated university apply through their medical center? So, individuals that work at research institutes or hospitals affiliated with a medical school or university, which in this case would be the degree granting institution, are eligible if they hold full time assistant professor faculty appointments at the doctoral degree granting institution.
Right. And they can apply, however, through the institution. For example, if it's, let's say that you're a hospital and the person has a faculty position at the university that meets the eligibility that Kevin just described. But the grant receiving organization would be the hospital that is allowed. Now to this
And
question, go ahead.
there's a question of can the institutional commitment letter form, um, the form, not the letter, so can the institutional commitment form come from the head of the 501(c)(3) grant receiving arm of the university and not the chair? The form must be completed by the department chair, um, except for those who are in the Department of Medicine or Department of Pediatrics. We allow that the division chief in for applicants in those departments, uh, division chiefs may fill out the form as long as they have the authority to guarantee that 75% research time protection.
Are encouraged. They're planning on switching models from mice to humans. Um, yeah, certainly. So this is thanks for asking this question. So I should have finished reading it. So they're planning on switching their model system from mice to humans, but all their prior publications and data are in the context of rodents. So as you know, the Doris Charitable Foundation grants themselves cannot be used to support research with animals. However, we understand that sometimes to get to the point where the project that you're proposing, you may have used research with animals or rodents or any model that's non-human, and that's okay. So if you present that as your preliminary data that's being used as the basis for the next step that you're proposing to us, that's completely okay. So preliminary mouse data or animal data in preliminary in preliminary data are allowed in the proposal as long as what you're proposing does not itself include research with those models.
So here's a question about effort protection and effort uh, dedicated to the CSDA grant. Um, so the question is there any advice around tackling the percent effort for the applicant on this specific grant, being the CSDA, if you have a concurrent career development award? Um, so there is no, we recognize that for a lot of career development awards, including NIHK awards, that the effort protection uh, at 75% is already a part of those awards. And there's no explicit minimum effort that we ask in the CSD that to be dedicated to the CSDA project itself. Um, and so we only ask that there be a guarantee of 75% of full-time professional effort uh, protected for research purposes, but there's no specific minimum uh, uh, that an effort required for dedicating specifically to the CSE project.
That if as an applicant you believe that you can take on more and then you can manage the two projects and grants, we don't see that as a problem or additional support. So it's something I guess we could clarify to reviewers well, but I think that we do. So
Here's an important question of whether there is from the foundation an intent to target specific diseases, um, or can interventions targeting various complex combinations of diseases be competitive? So, from the perspective of the foundation, we do not have any funding priorities based on diseases, disease areas, or any kind of research type. We encourage you really to look at our website and see the range of different projects that have been funded in recent years.
thanks, Kevin. There's also, this is similar to a question that was asked earlier, whether instructor level faculty are eligible for the CSEA. Um, we recognize that there is a lot of variability in how appointment titles are used across institutions. And because there's so much variability, for a few years now, we've made a determination of limiting it to assistant professors because from our side, it's very difficult to distinguish those that are faculty level instructors versus those that are not. So the competition is only open for those who have a title of assistant professors. Um, I will, Kevin, I don't know if you can answer this, the MD, the master's degree, but I'll skip to the next one just because it's somewhat related um, to funding that has been coming up and other funding. Um, they understand that you cannot be a PI or co-PI on an R01 grant and still be eligible, but you can receive salary or material support from someone else's, for example, a mentor's R01. Does that make you ineligible or are you eligible? Certainly, you can be the co-investigator or you can be your salary or some part of your effort can be under an R01 that is, or someone else is the principal investigator. However, you cannot be PI or co-PI, but that is completely okay, the situation you're describing. And cannot even become an assistant professor until they are on a K and put in R1 application. So there's no eligibility window. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We'll We'll make note. We'll take note for consideration.
There was I for some reason okay. My answer to the degree program went to a different question, so I'll answer both right now. So, in terms of the degree program, including completing master's programs in clinical investigation for uh, 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 career development, um, all education and training, including for master's programs, must be completed by the award start date of July 1, 2023. And the answer that or the question that answer accidentally went to is um, if you receive salary or material support from someone else, like a mentor, from a mentor's R01, can you still be eligible? And so, in terms of the funding award, as Cindy had mentioned, and as mentioned previously, we just uh, we just want to kind of emphasize that the CSCA is really for the transition towards independence, and our primary eligibility criteria is that you don't hold any R01 level, R01 or R1 equivalent awards yourself as the principal investigator, or awards that have funding over 225,000 for yourself. So
Thank you.
you can have support from someone, a mentor's R01, for instance.
Right. So I see another question here about instructor positions are not eligible, but also whether they count for against eligibility. So, for example, if they're an instructor for 2 years and then achieve assistant professor, um, does that instructor position year, do those count against the window? They don't. You start counting from your first assistant professor appointment. And there is a question about our the foundation's definition of clinical research that you mentioned that use of de-identified patient samples from a tissue bank have occasionally been funded. I think occasionally just means it rises to the top and maybe it's funded. But accessing these samples does require some level of IRB approval to ensure subject protection. Yeah, I think that what we were trying to get at here is um, I think a quick test for whether your project meets the definition is whether any part of it requires IRB approval. And sometimes that answer may be no, because you may be using perhaps a database that is de-identified. And in those cases, if you have questions of whether that meets the definition, please surely for sure get in touch, and we would be happy to clarify.
So there's a question here about uh, 501c3. I think it may have been partially answered in a previous question. Um, 501c3 Independent Research Institute partnered with a 501c3 university that is a doctoral granting institution. Um, so for investigators that are um, for in terms of applicants, we just we eligible applicants will need to have a full-time assistant professor appointment at a doctoral degree granting institution. So they may so yeah, so on, that would be the necessary kind of eligibility criteria.
Right. So in this case, if the researchers are at independent research institute, but they don't have that appointment, they would not be eligible to apply. The from Kimmer Brown, is it possible to delay onset of a grant start date to allow completion of clinical training? No, you have to be in the first assistant professor appointment. We do invite you, and Karen will be releasing another request for proposals later in the month, I believe, for physician scientists who are still in training at the subspecialty fellowship level. So you might want to just keep an eye for that RFA coming up. If you're waiting to hear back about an external non-NIH grant that would prohibit you from applying, and you don't anticipate hearing back until around. So I think, Jessica Turner, your question is about whether if you have another application that maybe it's the same project, maybe it's related or not, but for some reason that grant doesn't allow having a concurrent grant like this, the Clinical Scientist Development Award, um, what do you do then? I mean, we certainly don't recommend submitting the same application to us as another funder or submitting um, yeah but what we well let me I'm trying to think here of how to best address your question. So avoiding that situation, I think, is the best. But because, and the reason I say this is because the Clinical Scientist Development Award does not preclude you from having other grants. I mean, certainly the R1 and the CSDA are not compatible, right? We think that for those who are in R1 at that stage, they're past the CSDA stage. But I think you can only delay, certainly we would review the application, but it makes it's easier to plan for yourself and for the foundation if the applications are not overlapping.
So Rebecca Obeng has a question about salary support requested for the applicant. Does it have to equal the 75% research effort, and can they request less than 75% for salary support? So um, I just want to clarify here that budgetary the budgets are not required as part of the pre-proposal application, and that this is the specific budgets are more for the second stage of the application. However, I will say here that um, uh, again, there's no minimum required amount of effort that's needed to dedicate to the CSDA project itself. We require that you have 75% of your full-time professional effort dedicated to protected for research. Um, but if you request a salary effort from the CSEA, it must at least be the percent effort that you're dedicating to the CSA project.
5% from the CSDA. You can request as little as zero, as long as your effort is protected.
Exactly.
If you're currently a fellow but will have a faculty appointment at the time of the award, are you eligible? So I guess the short answer is no. You have to have been assistant professor at least for a year. So there's an actual window of eligibility stated in the RFA. So if you're not within that, you're not eligible to apply.
If you are a co-I on a U award, but you're primarily funded by a K, are you eligible? So we consider co-investigators. We don't we For R1 level awards, it must be really principal investigators are of R1 level awards are not eligible. If you're a co-investigator in a U award, but you're primarily funded through a K, you are eligible.
For Joanna asking about an R1, I recommend let's follow up over email. There is no R21 exemption. I think what we recognize is, as a general rule, is if you have a grant that is multi-year, that has direct cost annual of $225,000 or more, then you are not eligible. And if the R21 falls on that, then you are ineligible. Joanne is asking a previous like noted applicants institutions. Oh, sorry, my window is moving. Must be designated as a 501c3 organization and also award doctoral degrees. Does that eliminate hospital systems from consideration? No, that the answer is no, Joanne. So I guess the distinction that we were trying to make is that there are some applicants who have assistant professors at hospital systems, right? And the if they receive a grant, they would like that grant to go to the hospital rather to than the university at which they hold the institution. And that is okay. So the institution of faculty appointment can be different from the actual applicant institution that would receive the the funds should it be awarded. And there's a question here about a VA awards, whether they count similarly to the NIHK. We certainly don't make an exception right now, but thanks for bringing that to our attention, and we'll look into it a bit more.
There's a question here about, do eligibility criteria apply specifically to full-time faculty, or do previous part-time faculty positions apply in the window? So, um, full-time faculty is where the window is, but then you may apply for, I guess, eligibility. It depends on what the percentage of part-time
Yeah, I think
work is.
yeah, maybe for specific situations like these, Sasha, Fami, if you could follow up with us, we can give you a better answer
Yeah.
offline. But because it would depend on the circumstance, I think typically we would count from the assistant professor appointment. Getting an R1 in the middle of CSDA support time is acceptable, and that's a question, right? Certainly, we hope that as the CSDA starts, you will continue to do great work that needs more support, and you may very well get an R01 or equivalent grant or something larger in that time period, and that is okay. I guess the only consideration there is that we would expect that the costs that the grant is covering are not double covered by some other grant, but I think that we certainly um, that's welcome. We hope that happens. If you already have a K award, how different should this proposal be in terms of scope and mentorship? I think that applicants know, what I recommend looking at what we're looking for to support in terms of the project, and the mentorship and institutional support. I think that for applicants that submit to us, it should be clear, how is this helping you advance your research program, right? I don't think we can tell how it should be different. But that's more on an individual basis based on your own project. Kevin, happy to jump into the next one. The next question of whether research that uses consortium data or tissue banks can be proposed, and certainly I think that's we would consider that to be clinical research as per our definition. But if you
Right.
have more specific questions, please get in touch to Krithi or Mandy.
There's a question about acting instructors or acting assistant professors. Um, so we recognize that there are a variety of different nomenclature for different appointments, and so what we mean for eligibility is that full-time assistant professor position appointments are what's eligible. Um, Part-time appointments, acting appointments, uh, or affiliated appointments are we would not consider as full-time assistant professor appointments, and therefore would not be eligible.
Thank you, Kevin. I also see a question here about whether we could say more about the handshake rule and what are some of the common pitfalls people make while proposing research that falls afoul of the requirement for the grant. And I will just say, just to clarify, that we do not have a handshake requirement or rule. I recognize there are other awards and other career development awards that have that. For the Doris Charitable Foundation, we certainly care that these be clinical research, what you're proposing. And the best guide for that really is the definition, which we is broad, right? It includes research on mechanism of disease, and that perhaps use some patient samples to answer the question, but also includes researchers working on understanding um, hospital-based systems and processes and how that impacts care, right? So that I again, I think the best guidance is from the clinical research definition. And if you have specific questions about your particular project, to get in touch with us. And there's a question here whether a degree program can be started while on the grant. I think we say the degrees have to be training towards degrees. Higher degrees have to be completed because we recognize that it is you'll have demands on your time already from the research and from the clinic. So to be eligible, that's why we ask that applicants have finished their training toward degrees, since it will be another it will take from your time as well.
There's a question here about animal research, um, and whether they can use mice in a xenotransplant model for this grant. So there's no the grant will not support any experiment or any work whatsoever with non-human animal models, or cells derived or cells and tissues derived from non-human animals. So that would not be eligible.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, so even though the transplant would be, let's say, this human, I'm assuming, then the model there is still a mouse. The CSE application will be entirely separate project application with no overlap for this applicant. Um, oh, your concern. Oh, yes, I see that this is perhaps a follow up. So the concern is that if another grant is awarded, the eligibility to receive funding from the proposed CSDA project is selected would be in jeopardy based on direct funding criterion for multi-year. Mm, So let me be clear here. So for R1s, you could, if you already applied for an R1, then you're not eligible for a CSDA. Even if you submit a proposal, even if that doesn't get funded, that doesn't make you eligible for a CSDA. Um, if you submitted an application to another career development award that is completely different from what you proposed to the Doris Charitable Foundation, and they both get funded, that's fine by the Doris Charitable Foundation. I mean, where you might run into trouble is the other funder may not allow those two projects to be those two grants to be concurrent. So from our perspective, that doesn't having another application for a different project doesn't jeopardize your eligibility or your potential to get another application. And I see one last question about whether patient cohorts, the requirement for human research, the patient cohort we propose to study provides samples that are de-identified, but are linked to clinical metadata. Um, a collaborator of the person asking the question has full access to sample identification and link to patients. Is this kind of research supported? uh just reading this, I don't see why not. Is human subject based research. But certainly if there's any particular aspect or nuance that we are not touching here, please get in touch with us. And I think we answered a lot of questions here. It seems like we answered all of them, Kevin. I don't
I think so. Wow.
uh,
Um,
so
so
yeah, 1 p.m. Go ahead.
yeah,
You want to
we're at
close this off?
time. I thank you everyone for taking the time to join us here. We encourage you to again download the RFA, read through it carefully, go to the FAQ at our website, and if you have any additional specific questions, to please reach us at ddcf@aibs.org. And we look forward to receiving your applications.